St. Augustine commentary on the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 15 to 17, following. And because he gave the Spirit, did he on that account fail in afterwards sending him according to his promise? Or was it not the very same Spirit who was both then breathed upon them by himself and afterwards sent by him from heaven? Acts chapter 2, verse 4. And so, while that same giving on his part, which took place publicly, also took place twice, is another question. For it may be that this twofold bestowal of his in a public way took place because of the two commandments of love, that is, to our neighbor and to God, in order that love might be impressively intimated as pertaining to the Holy Spirit. And if any other reason is to be sought for, we can't at present allow our discourse to be improperly prolonged by such an inquiry. Provided, however, it be admitted that without the Holy Spirit we can neither love Christ nor keep his commandments, while the less experience we have of his presence, the less also can we do, and the fuller our experience, so much the greater our ability. Accordingly, the promise is no vain one, either to him who has not the Holy Spirit, or to him who has. For it is made to him who has not, in order that he may have, and to him who has, that he may have more abundantly. For were it not that he was possessed by some in smaller measure than by others, Saint Elijah would not have said to Saint Elisha would not have said to Saint Elijah, "Let the Spirit that is in you be in a twofold measure in me." 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 9. But when John the Baptist said, "For God gives not the Spirit by measure," chapter 3, verse 34, he was speaking exclusively of the Son of God who received not the Spirit by measure, for in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead. Colossians chapter 2, verse 9. And no more is it independently of the grace of the Holy Spirit that the mediator between God and man is the man Jesus. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5. For with his own lips he tells us that the prophetical utterance had been fulfilled in himself. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me, he has sent me to preach the gospel to the poor. Luke chapter 4, verse 18 to 21. For his being the only begotten, the equal of the Father, is not of grace but of nature. But the assumption of human nature into the personal unity of the only begotten is not of nature but of grace. As the gospel acknowledges itself when it says, "And the child grew and waxed strong, being filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was in him." Luke chapter 2, verse 40. But to others he is given by measure, a measure ever enlarging until each has received his full complement up to the limits of his own perfection. As we are also reminded by the Apostle not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God has dealt to every man the measure of faith. Romans chapter 12, verse 3. Nor is it the Spirit himself that is divided, but the gifts bestowed by the Spirit, for there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 4. But when he says, I will ask the Father, and he shall give you another paraclete, he intimates that he himself is also a paraclete. For paraclete is in Latin called advocatus, advocate. And it is said of Christ, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. 1 John chapter 2, verse 1. But he said that the world could not receive the Holy Spirit in much the same sense as it is also said, the minding of the flesh is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. Romans chapter 8, verse 7. Just as if we were to say, unrighteousness can't be righteous. For in speaking in this passage of the world, he refers to those who love the world, and such a love is not of the Father. 1 John chapter 2, verse 16. And thus the love of this world, which gives us enough to do to weaken and destroy its power within us, is in direct opposition to the love of God, which is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Spirit, who is given unto us. The world therefore can't receive him because it sees him not, neither knows him. For worldly love possesses not those invisible eyes, whereby, save in an invisible way, the Holy Spirit can't be seen. But you, he adds, shall know him, for he shall dwell with you and be in you. He will be in them that he may dwell with them. He will not dwell with them to the end, and he may be in them, for the being anywhere is prior to the dwelling there. But to prevent us from imagining that his words, he shall dwell with you, were spoken in the same sense as that in which a guest usually dwells with a man in a visible way, he explained that what he shall dwell with you meant. For he added the words, he shall be in you. He is seen, therefore, in an invisible way, nor can we have any knowledge of him unless he be in us. For it is in a similar way that we come to see our conscience within us. For we see the face of another, but we can't see our own. But it is our own conscience we see, not another's. And yet conscience is never anywhere but within us. But the Holy Spirit can be also apart from us, since he is given that he may also be in us. But we can see and know him in the only way in which he may be seen and known, unless he be in us.